And thank you for staying with us. We're having such incredible conversation this morning on Ballot 2017 and, of course, Citizen Extra. I am Ann Kiguta. We introduced to our panel this hour, lawyer extraordinaire.
I'd love to believe that.
Kamozo Eganjo, welcome to the program. Good to have you alongside us. And I just want to pick up from where we left off, even as we progress and transition into the topic change of guard. Obviously, there has been almost a complete overhaul of county government leadership, and so we're going to be seeing new people take office. But we left at the point where we were talking about the court jesters, the people who are there either for comic relief or who have been in these circles of power for so long that they do have a significant stake and audience, if you like, with powerful leaders, and the extent to which they are the cause of some of the missteps. Your thoughts on that, even as we talk about new people now coming into office?
I think one is to recognize that we're at a very critical juncture in terms of how we manage our politics going forward. The first Jubilee administration had the challenge of the fact that its political spread during the elections 2013 did not reflect a significant portion of the country. Number two, the Jubilee government 2013 was also planning for President Uhuru was planning for how to arrange to structure a government that would enable him to win 2017. This is President Uhuru's final term. The space he has now, and especially in light of the fact that Jubilee has expanded its boundaries, its political boundaries from its traditional core areas where it was very well supported in 2013, gives President Uhuru a tremendous opportunity to do two things. One, to ensure at a technical level that he considers the question of competence, capacity, and ability to deliver as the first entry point to the people who get into his government. But to do that, also looking at the conversation about inclusion, whether we like it or not. The conversation we're having now about a botched election and whether the election was fair is actually not a conversation about an election. It's a conversation about whether the election has answered our other questions. And it's clear that it hasn't. I think there are very few people who would deny that the election the results largely reflect where Kenyans voted. But it's clear also that there are certain questions it hasn't answered. And President Uhuru has a tremendous opportunity to answer those questions. Now, for instance, the question of inclusion. Inclusion is a big thing. If you remember, one of the accusations that were made about Jubilee 2013 is that the government largely reflected the core constituencies of Rift Valley and the Gema community. That statement was overrated, but it was true to some extent, and it was also understandable, because when you're elected, when the core of your electorate comes from a particular area, you do have to respond to that. Now the reality is that boundaries have been expanded. That excuse is no longer available. There are people now who voted very significantly from Samburu community, from Kwale, from Turkana, from very different places. So even if you are just to respond to the question of rewarding, in quote, your electorate, you'd have to do that. But it also cannot stop there. We must also answer the question, why is it that there's a significant portion of this country that is feeling excluded? How do you answer that? And I think in my mind, there are two things. One is how you included them in government. But also we must now ask the question whether Jubilee has supported both in heart, soul, and mind the question of devolving resources and capacitating the growth of devolved units. Because I don't think government is big enough to include everybody. It's practically not possible. And remember, we're talking about the executive. We're not talking about the whole government. It's not possible. But I think the answer to it is partly to ensure you include some of the ethnic elite, because that's what we're talking about, but also to ensure that where inclusion really matters, which is at the county government level, that we truly are committed both in mind and body, and that it is obvious that we are not trying to pull back and to undo some of the constitutional gains of devolved government by ensuring that we are supporting those governments. If Jubilee does those two things, ensuring some level of inclusion at the executive level, and then ensuring that its support for devolution is unqualified,
but why must
this conversation will change.
The ethnic elite, Kamozo? Why the ethnic elite? Why not just picking any competent person.
Because, Anne, the conversation about inclusion is no longer about including communities. Let me tell you, it is no longer including communities. It is not about communities, because if you really want to resolve the communities question, you do that by empowering them at the base. It is not about that you must have the representatives at the top.
It's about individuals?
It's not about, that's what I'm saying. If you really want to include community, it's not about individuals. It's about how you empower the route through which communities benefit. And the route through which communities benefit is ensuring, one, that the national resource, because the national government is still in charge of a significant part of the resource.
85%?
Yeah, is equitably distributed. That's the first point. We need to see that in the budget. And we forget that the budget is actually managed not by the executive, but the legislature. So we need to ensure that that is happening, that part of the resource that is managed by the is equitably resolved. That is not about having individuals at the top. Number two, when we come to devolution, we need to now move from just talk to action. We need to see that the commitment to ensure equity, the commitment to empower devolved system is one of the clarion calls of a Jubilee administration. If we do that, we reduce the conversation to just whether we need to include a particular part of the ethnic elite, and we need to not mix the two conversations.
And that is why I want to pause you there, because I think there may be something that we're missing. You've talked very much about inclusion being critical, and in particular in the executive, having that show. But you're saying also the conversation about inclusion is not about communities, it's about the ethnic elite.
Yes.
And I am asking, so how do we help the situation by appointing the same ethnic elite? Should we not be moving forward past it and saying, no, it is not about ethnic elite, it is about every community having representation, and not just representation, but skilled and competent representation. So for instance, as we've talked about Ekuru Aukot, who comes from a smaller community, but also matches with skill.
Let me ask this. We have...
Well, I'm asking. I don't know if I'm really
No, let me say this.
Right.
You see, what I'm saying is we must not conflate the two conversations. Let us not assume that if we included every member of the ethnic elite in this country, we have resolved the inclusion question. We have resolved the inclusion question of you and I, who can afford to get space there.
Right.
But we will not have resolved the issue on the ground. So what I'm saying, that those two issues must be resolved together. And for me, the most critical one the government must look at is to ensure that we have equity at the base. And the way we will do that, let us have equity in the way we resolve the part of the national government resource, and number two, empower county government. Then let us say, having resolved that, or even as we resolve that, when a person from Northeastern looks at the national executive, do they see that it is reflective? But let us not assume that is what resolves the national problem. You know, the reason I say that is because the conversation right now is about, in fact, for many people, expanding the executive at the top. Let us expand. Let us create more positions so that everybody is there. Remember that for every position we create, every time we expand the executive at the top, that comes at a cost to somebody. So for me, I'm saying that if we're going to have a conversation about including people at the top, we must also answer, particularly resolve the question, how do we ensure that exclusion makes sense to the person on the ground? So those two conversations are mutually exclusive, but we must not forget that the more critical conversation about empowerment at the base. Let us have those two conversations.
And let's focus, and I beg your pardon to my other panelists, but I just want to complete your train of thought, Kamudo, on the question of now devolution and improving it. What are you talking about? Are you talking about more resources, as we saw NASA campaign for, going to county governments, or in which other way can devolution be strengthened? More resources
released on time. More resources released on time, more effective support. Remember that devolution is not just about money. Devolution is also about infrastructural support. It's also about institutional support. It's ensuring that you have the support for county governments that is necessary. When we have funds that are released and not released on time, when we have money that is retained in key sectors, when we have a ballooning parastatal sector, which is actually utilizing money that would otherwise have gone to functions that are already devolved. You know, there is a problem there. And if we are going to actually be committed to devolution, it's not just about saying 15 or 20%. It's also saying, let us also reduce that part of the national government that is cannibalizing devolution. So those are the things.
Which part?
That I mentioned to you, the parastatal sector. The parastatal sector, for example, there are a lot of parastatals right now that actually have no business in light of the devolved government. There are certain parastatals by now we should be collapsing and ensuring that those resources are going to the county governments.
Right.
If you talk about even issues like capacity building, one of the challenges we've had at the county governments is actually a question of capacity. We need to see that there's sufficient resources being put by because the national government still controls a lot of resources to facilitate capacity building at that level. We need to ensure that we are also seeing a lot more coordination about the utilization of resources by the national government in county, so that if the national government is going to be spending money in Turkana County, we want to see that there are coordinating mechanisms for that spending. When we haven't seen, for example, the intergovernmental mechanisms very effective. Right now the intergovernmental mechanisms hardly work. We want to see in this second administration that the summit meets, that it actually reveals a lot of the key issues. We want to see the sectoral committees that are supposed to be dealing with particular issues in infrastructure, in roads. We want to see those things working, because for as long as we don't do that, we can give some monies to the county government, but we are also cannibalizing them. So what I am saying is we want to see true support for devolved governments. That is not to say that that's all we need to see, but that for me is actually where we need to concentrate on, even as we ensure that the national...
And arguably it will be easier now that they have a majority in COG. One can only assume that we'd all be, going in the same direction, Mark.
You know, one of the things that we need to understand is President Uhuru Kenyatta has been president now, if he's inaugurated, for 2 terms. He has no political gains to be had for 2022. This is the time to separate and to understand the role of a president and the role of a head of state. The role of executive power and the role of being seen as a symbol for national unity. Now, one of the things that you have to fault Jubilee on is this. Jubilee is a very intelligent government. Intelligent in the sense that it is talking about roads and SGR and development and stuff like that, but it is totally incompetent in terms of the emotional quotient that you need to lead a nation. What is lacking in the Jubilee administration is we are not dealing with the software issues of the average Kenyan. What I feel like, and no matter even if the SGR was to end at my doorstep, if I have emotions that are negative towards your presidency, I will still not be clapping my hands.
And these will not resolve themselves.
Yes. Now, what needs to happen is Jubilee needs to step out in this particular term and put political interests aside. Put your political war dogs aside. If I was president, by the way, I would tell Moses Kuria to keep quiet. I would tell Aidan Duale to keep quiet.
Not now.
Yes, because right now you need the kind of person who, like George Saitoti said many years ago, he stood up and he said that comes a time when the nation is more important than the individual. We need someone who can stand up and say, like Martin Luther, I dream of a nation. I don't dream of a Jubilee, I don't dream of a NASA, but I dream of a Kenya. Where are those speeches that make us stand up and feel rightfully Kenyan? That is what we need. We are not investing in the emotions of our people, and therefore what is happening in the ground, as a baby has died today, we are still looking at it as political capital to say, guess what, this government is doing XYZ. Because this government, in as much as it's good with the hardware, is not focusing on the emotions of the people, dealing with what people feel.
But it is the whole, walk and chew gum thing, that they both need to go together.
Exactly.
Let's transition then now, if you would, and talk about the change of...
Before you say that, I think there's also an issue we overstate. And while I agree in principle with what is being said, the truth of the matter is that Jubilee may not have done it perfectly. But I think there is something that the current electoral map says, that there's a journey Jubilee started in getting itself heard outside its core zones. One of the greatest accusations about Jubilee was just that in 2013, that they were very opaque to listening to everybody else other than themselves. The reality is that if you look at even the way the Jubilee campaign was done, the Jubilee campaign concentrated a lot in areas where were not their traditional core areas. And even when it was clear they were not going to get a vote. And I think they were trying to deal with the software of those. Did they do it perfectly? No. But the electoral map and the electoral results say that their voices, some people started to hear. What they need to do is expand that conversation beyond there. But I think that journey has started. We should not stop. We need to expand so that everybody feels they are a part of this country.
Right. Absolutely. And now let's transition to the change of guard. And Joy, if you would. Of course, new governors, as we've said, are taking over. And there are concerns already regarding this transition. You've seen what the incoming governor of Nairobi has had to say in terms of any actions by the outgoing governor. There is concern of sabotage. There's concern that documents could be destroyed. And now I'm not just talking about Nairobi, but largely speaking, there's concern about, county executives who are already now entrenched in the system. How do we manage this change of guard so that devolution does not suffer and we don't have another whole 1 year where basically nothing is being done and it's blamed on transition?
Now, the unfortunate thing is that this is the first time we are handling it. And so there will be teething problems. That's something I don't think we can run away from. If there's something we learned from the Nyeri transition was that once a governor exits office, whoever comes in has to start with his own team. That a right he has been given. For the mere fact that it would be foolhardy to expect a new new executive to work with the old team and there to be cohesion because of the same issues, sabotage and just little personality differences that may not augur too well. So one thing that we're going to see, for example, like what Governor-elect Sonko said, in my opinion, was in very poor taste because the governor is in charge, yes, of the county, but it's other people who are in charge of the money taps. He has his executive officers who are in charge of, and even how IFMIS works, it's something that is not entirely in the control of the governor. That is one. Secondly, Governor Kidero is still governor until such a time when he hands over to Governor-elect Sonko. So it's also disrespectful to think about the person who's exiting office for you to come in to start on that footing. That said, it means therefore that the CECs, the committee members who are in Kidero's government should rightly expect that they're unlikely to retain their positions unless some miracle happens. Therefore, what you're talking about, destruction of vital documents and things like that, that is what is going to happen. One thing that is going to help Kenya moving forward is the establishment of systems, so that systems work rather than the people being in control of things. I've been in the court system for a while, and this is when they're starting to digitize. And there's a time when, if I was handling a case and the incentive made a lot of sense, I could make it disappear. And we'd have to make a skeleton court file, and we'd have to start from fresh. And justice would be perverted simply because one person was the weak link in the chain. And that's what we have right now. Moving forward, I'm hoping that the national government is going to invest not just in systems for the sake of effective running of the counties, but for what Kamozo said. One of my problems with having more resources in the counties is because the counties already have shown that they are not being stellar in the management of what they already have. They're not utilizing it as properly. They have become little dens of corruption as well. Can we have systems that are going to start plugging those holes, so that even if we get more resources to the counties, those resources actually do what they're supposed to do? Again, also for the professionals, they ought to have known, I have a life until the next governor. It's like the cabinet secretaries. If, for example, Raila Odinga is the one who was elected president of Kenya and it was not Jubilee going back in, it would be very foolhardy for the cabinet secretaries to imagine that they were going to retain their jobs. So it's one of those things where even as a professional, if you're going for a county position, you should know reasonable expectation is that I am working for the life span of this particular dispensation. Once there's a change of guard, if I do retain my position, it will be a matter of grace. If I don't, it's a matter of moving forward. Who stands to gain if there is sabotage? Because we've seen many cases that are being called by the Senate, there are people who are under investigation by EACC. Those are the people who ought to safeguard such positions. And if there is found to be that sabotage, now this is also another opportunity for us, because we've been saying corruption is a big killer in this country. Let heads roll. Let us see high-profile prosecutions. Don't let people get away with such things, because Kenya has to reach a place where the big, quote-unquote, big people start paying the price. Remember what Kamodo said and what Dunstan said before him. What we have in Kenya right now with the inclusion is not just a matter of having people from various communities. It actually becomes a club. These guys who know each other and they're like, man, it's too bad you lost. Tell you what, there's this water board somewhere. Why don't you go ahead with that thing? Why don't you take this and that? We need to get to a place where this big man syndrome starts wilting away, so that we put competence and benefits ahead of political expediency.
Contextualize that for us, Kamodo, in now the change of guard and the transition for county government.
Yeah. One of the challenges we have as a country is that we, I think it's a Bible that talks about new wine in old wine.
Right.
The reality
look
is
at you, all readers of the Bible.
the reality, my mother would be so impressed whenever she is. Now, you see, the reality is that this constitution that we passed, one of the critical things it was trying to do is to depersonalize power, so that there's not too much investment in that big, I'm trying to say big man, because now I think we also have women. But it was trying to do that. But I think we are still caught up in that, so that the excitement around Governor Sonko saying, I'm not going to spend the money on that, I am directing, he has no such power. I mean, it's a good thing in terms of sending a message. But I think one of the things we have is we assume this is the governor's money. Now, when that governor's money is spent well, it is okay when the governor is a good governor. But remember that in many cases, when you do not use systems, what we have is that we suffer. We pay a heavy price. What we need to continue doing, this is the first time that we are devolving from one, we are moving from, transitioning from one county government to the next after an election. We need to recognize that what will save devolution is the growth of strong institutions at the county level. And so therefore, one of the questions we need to ask, and I think it is something that we made a mistake in the law, what is the caliber of staff that must move out when a new county government comes in? Right now, the way the law is, it actually looks like it's only the CECs, the ministers. It looks like the chief officers are actually not required to leave. It also looks like, certain heads of certain bodies, like the public service, the head of the public service and all, like those bodies will continue. Now remember that a lot of these are political appointees. These are people who were nominated by the previous governor. My own view is that that top caliber of the political appointees actually need to move as a matter of law. They all need to move unless the new governor wants to retain. But everybody else needs to stay, because those institutions are the ones that are going to determine whether the government is functioning. And if decisions then are made that are prejudicial to the incoming administration, those officers would pay, because a lot of those are the directors. They're the ones who make executive decisions at that level, and they are not going to be willing to do things that will compromise their own record and their own whatever after the election. So we need to, in the law now, make it very clear that a certain caliber of people leave. Number two,
but as it stands, how would then an incoming governor deal with those offices where people are not required to leave? How do you remove people from those positions?
Now, and this is a discussion for lawyers that is going to happen in the next 6 months. It appears that the courts have introduced what is called the pleasure doctrine. There was a court of appeal decision that seemed to indicate that there are certain caliber of officers that serve at the pleasure of the executive. And those are people who, so even though it's not in the letter of the law, it appears that the court has said there's a certain caliber of people that you can actually, as a new head of the executive, let go, because they serve at the pleasure of the executive. Now, that pleasure is not pleasure entirely. There must also be a due process by which you remove them. It's not that you just wake up one morning and tell them to go.
In which case are we saying?
We're actually talking about the chief officers.
You're talking about the pleasure doctrine, and you're saying that the decision of the appeals court.
It seems to indicate that the pleasure doctrine applies, and it is not just for the CECs. It also applies to those people who are appointed, who are nominated by the governor and approved by the assembly. And that includes, I believe, the chief officers and certain heads of certain, I believe the public service board. I think that's the members of the public service board. And in which case was
that was before the...
So the reason is I may not remember. I think it was Catherine Wangeshi versus... It related to the Nyeri County Assembly, if I'm not wrong.
We could always check up here.
But I'm saying that we now need to locate that in the law, so that we are not talking about interpretation. So that the governor is very clear that when you come in, this is the only caliber of staff that's available to you. There are a lot of governors coming assuming they're going to get rid of the entire administration. That is not true. A lot of governors, like the ones who came in 2013, are assuming that they come and they'll manage resources and they're going to determine where money goes. Untrue. The reality is that the structures that were put in the law are very, very strong on ensuring the institutions that are managing resources. When it comes to budget, that budget is not passed by the governor. The governor makes a recommendation. The county assembly can adjust it whichever way they want and approve it. That is the power of the assembly. When it comes to programs, again, the governor makes a recommendation. The assembly approves or changes. That is the checks and balances that we introduce in the law. The problem is we are still operating on the big man syndrome. We're assuming Governor X is going to suddenly wave a word and do whatever he wants. That is not good.
So Nairobi, calm down. Is that what you're saying?
I think that no, there's a principle. Let me say this. It is not to dismiss the issue. It is to say that what the governor should be saying is basically saying the principles that are going to inform my administration are the following. But let's not start dealing with detail. Saying no, go and spend money on this, no, move this one from here. You have no such power. But you can be able to talk about, we're not going to have graft in my administration. We are going to ensure that we operate under the rule of law. There are certain things you can enforce. There are certain things that in terms of the people you pick, you start to send the message that you're going to be a particular kind of administration. But we need to be very, very careful that we don't start sending the message to governors that you are an executive who doubles around with how resources are spread out and how they are spent. That is the theory, and it is coming from where we have come from as a country, where the presidency, remember when we say siasa mbaya maisha mbaya, when we used to assume that once you have the president, which is also, by the way, a lie even of the elections, we assume that the presidency matters everything. Everything fails and collapses or works well if we win the presidency. We need to ensure that we are strengthening institutions so that this fight for these high offices don't take us to the point where they've taken us. It is not healthy and it is not reflective of the law. So a lot of our problems is that we have a constitution which we are bound with in letter when we must, and we try and look for opportunities to avoid, but we ignore its spirit. Its spirit was to empower institutions and to de-empower individuals.
Mark.
You know, one of the key things that we need to understand, the focus on the governor, I think, is a bit misplaced. The focus is actually on the MCAs. The MCAs are the ones who get to control the budget. They are the ones who put a check on the governor. In fact, the role of Senate as well is grossly underplayed, because Senate is responsible to say how much of the national government resources get to go down to the governor's level. So the question really that Kenyans need to understand is the Constitution envisioned that the average Kenyan will participate in politics by holding his MCA, his MP, and his senator to keep the executive arms of government in check. That is what was envisioned. And without that, what happens is we keep putting expectations on these governors that is unrealistic. And to go to Sonko's statement, it is a very misleading statement, because unless you have been sworn in, you cannot instruct the current governor on what to do. It is an imaginary thing. You are still governor-elect. You cannot dictate what the governor is doing. For example, today, if there is a crisis, we do not expect that Sonko is the one to respond. It is Kidero who is supposed to respond. We don't expect now that all county government functions have been suspended pending for Sonko to give direction. And even if Sonko was to rise to power, until he's put his executive committee in place and put his agenda on the floor of the local assembly, he is also unable to do anything that has not already been approved.
But they may be sitting back and saying, out of all the county governments, we are the ones who walk in with the majority of MCAs. So it's going to be smooth sailing.
Not necessarily, and I'll tell you why this is crazy. Remember, Sonko came out with his manifesto only 2 weeks before, 2 or 3 weeks before the election.
Right.
He still needs to take that document and turn it from a list of dreams to practical steps, practical laws, and practical things that can actually be passed by the assembly, put into a budget, and then executed. It is not something that is going to be able to do by, as the good lawyer said, by the wave of a wand. We need to understand as Kenyans that we have a rule of law that we must learn to respect, and as citizens we must also learn to participate.
And in fact, you know what we are forgetting is we're in the middle of a financial year.
Right.
You know, the budgets were passed in March.
Yes.
Right.
The money was given in June.
Yes.
So actually the room for maneuver for these first governors is pretty limited. The assembly can still adjust the budget slightly, but even that there's a limit in the law. So what we are saying is that we need to recognize that what the Constitution does, what the county government laws do, is to remove the power of individuals so that institutions continue. Remember, actually, the county governments are even required to have 10-year plans. They're supposed to have 5-year plans. These plans, once they have been passed, they're actually binding on the incoming government, and they can adjust a few things, but they can't completely put it aside and start spending money in completely fresh ways. So what we are saying is that slow down, go easy. Some of the mistakes that were made by the governors in 2013, some of the things that landed them before the PSC in the Senate, was actually assuming that once you have come in, you are running government, you know, buy vehicles, send for vehicles, and then they said, wait a minute, where is your procurement plan? Was it approved? If it wasn't approved, you cannot purchase. So what we are saying is that people need to go easy. There are systems in place, you can adjust them slightly, they need to reflect your new way of thinking, but you're not coming out on a clean slate and creating your own system, you know, from nothing. And I think many need to be trained in that area.
Right, but by and large, should we not then be reading the statements by Sonko and Charity Ngilu, you know, pay workers, pay water bills. We don't want these big ceremonies really to be purely political, and not necessarily, unless people are actually expecting water bills will be paid by money.
But some of those functions are important also for the people to own the process. We have gone ahead and we have elected somebody. They have been put in office. And remember, we want Kenyans to get to a place where they identify strongly with their county, so that the fixation with the national government also sort of wanes away. And so for them to have a ceremony where they go and they quote-unquote witness the swearing in of the new governor is actually very therapeutic for the electorate. It's also symbolic of the fact that we are now pulling together in this particular county under this leadership. Remember, there's been a political contest, some of them very bruising. For example, here in Nairobi, even Charity Ngilu is coming from a very bruising context. You need to have a situation where you can talk to all the people in your area and tell them, look, this is the beginning of a new era. And for us to belittle those ceremonies and say, no, go ahead and do something else with the money. It's not a lot of money that is used for these things. It's, in fact, there's more money being used to give people the send-away packages at the end of their good service to this nation than are being used in those swearing-in ceremonies. To think that it is enough to pay off all the debts of the county is a bit presumptuous. But also something that Kamodo has said that is very, very critical. We need to also understand how these processes work. For example, even this election, 3/4 of the problem is because people don't really understand how the processes work. Kenyans need to learn to give themselves an education. If you're interested in something, how does county government work? Sit down, read up on it. When they're in session, go sit in the public gallery. Even national government, the National Assembly has a public gallery. Go sit. Listen, learn, because when you give yourself an education in how these things function, then you remove the mystery, you remove the sting out of the ignorance. Because the problem we have in Kenya today is that people are very quick to say something or to criticize or to break something down without sufficiently taking time to understand. Like what the misstep we are seeing with the governor-elects right now. The main problem is because they too do not fully understand what they're going in to do. And when you get there, you have a culture shock like Donald Trump, unfortunately. We referred to that a little bit. You get that, or you mean I can't just hire and fire like I did on The Apprentice. Oh, their system, oh, there's something in place. And some of these guys, that's what is going to hit them, because remember the ones from before when they went in and all the time they're fighting this impeachment by the MCAs. The MCAs also had too high expectations of themselves, thinking that they could hire and fire at will, and seeing somebody like Wambora coming even for a second term is actually baffling. People need to understand what exactly do these positions have, what exactly are the powers, what are the responsibilities, what is the expectation, and strive towards delivering that. Because short of that, then even you as the person in office, you'll find yourself having a lot of dissatisfaction, thinking that they're actually raining on the parade.
Embarrassment.
Yes, raining on the parade when actually you don't have the power to do what you're purporting to do.
You know, Joe, you've made a very important point. you see, we forget that power is also about visibility. You know, I used to be one of those who had a big problem with governors being called Your Excellency and with all the trappings of power that come with it.
Governors is one.
Until I went to one county which I shall not name, towards the northern part of Kenya. And there was a huge ceremony surrounding the governor, his chair, and something, and there was a lot of drama around him. And I suddenly realized, this is the first time that these people feel government is here. Now, it's unfortunate that that's the way we perceive government, but that is people understanding of government. So sometimes I find it irresponsible that we have no problem with big ceremonies at the national level, huge inaugurations, huge razzmatazz around the national government, but we want to say for the county governments, be easy. Some of these ceremonies, be easy. Those things are important in telling people that these governments matter. These are governments. These are not extensions of the national government. These are not decentralized units. That these are governments, and so that profile, that ceremony, those things are important. Of course, we must be sure that we don't overspend and we are careful about the procurement. But let us have those things, because it is saying to people, government has come to you.
And to pick up on those 2 points, one of the things that becomes critical to understand, both at the national and the gubernatorial level, is that our constitution has guaranteed Kenyans certain minimums. You are sure that both governments will do certain things in healthcare, in education, in infrastructure. And that should actually be one of the reasons why we remove the hot air we pump into the elections. Our elections are no longer about life and death, because our constitution guarantees that even if the person I don't like becomes governor or president, I can rest assured that there are certain minimums that are guaranteed. That's the first thing. The second thing, and the second space that we need to walk into, is we need to understand that as we build the institutions of the gubernatorial level, the dream actually is, and this is why I think the framers of the constitution were quick to to put the minimums of governors, how much money they can receive from central government, because the dream is to build these county governments to be able to be at a point where they are able to generate revenues themselves. The truth of the matter is, if you look at a state like California, California has a huge GDP by itself. So what is the desire? The desire is that these counties will be able to produce resources for themselves that are able to change the face of the county and then collectively change the face of the nation. So the focus really should be that we are moving away from where we are looking at how much central government is giving to us, but we are also looking at the question, how much is Nairobi as a county able to produce for itself and be able to change itself? That is really the question, and that is where, by the way, I think Evans Kidero failed, because he failed to imagine a new Nairobi. He failed to give the people of Nairobi this vision of where he's going to. So whereas he did some things, but they did not seem to have congruency in terms of vision, because Nairobi has 60% of the GDP. If there is a county that was supposed to have changed how things work for its people, it was Nairobi. And one of the things that I think Sonko is trying to do, because I saw a post earlier today on Facebook talking about he wants to deal with rubbish and things like that, those are the things that you need to be able to do as a governor. A governor is a political office that is able to give direction and vision to his county.
So all eyes on Polycarp Igathe for the work is
yes. And one thing that also we need to understand is that some of these counties are too small to be financially viable, as Mark envisages. And we need to come to a place where we see governors coming with how do I put it? It's like collaborations between counties. Yes. If we say like my county is really small, your county is really small, we can have this MOU where we decide, you know what, we're going to form a county government of national unity right over here, where we can use the same officers running both counties so that we maximize on, we can pool our resources. We need to have governors who are thinking like that. So you don't have your own little chieftain, a little kingdom where you're hogging this space and you know you cannot maximize it. Let us have 2 or 3 counties coming together, come up with an MOU, have a sort of rotational thing, and maximize what we get, so that we can, because the people who, as Kamozo said, this is the first time they're actually seeing services in the areas where they are, and they're feeling a part of Kenya. Let's let's blow this thing out of the water. Let's make maximum use of it.
You know, and I went around this country, I think more than I have in this campaign. And one of the things that shocked me, and I'll keep saying this, is that Kenyans are poor and Kenyans are struggling. I mean, I met slums in central Kenya. You know, I think because I stay on the highway going to my mother's house, and I hardly ever depart completely into the deep villages, there are many things I haven't seen. The avenue for resolving these issues is actually the county government. If you look at the way the constitution distributed functions, the functions that actually touch the people are with the county government. Water, health, agriculture, all those things are with the county government. The county government must now move from the point of just growing themselves and growing the big man to actually delivering services. And one of the ways they're going to have to do that is by actually working together. If you look, for example, at the collapse of the referral system in the health sector, it is because counties have refused to work together. When you see the former provincial hospital in Nyeri struggling, it is because the county governments of Murang'a, Kirinyaga, and the other ones there have refused to fund it together to make it a regional unit, and they have left it to the county government of Nyeri to fund it. And the county government of Nyeri is thinking, we can't put all our budget there, and yet the people who come here come from those counties. A progressive government.
I think Mombasa there was the same argument.
They'll have to do that. Nyanza the same thing. A lot of the people go to Nyanza provincial are not from Kisumu. What you'd have expected is the governors of Homa Bay, of Migori, would put money together and actually make that a regional hospital. We need to see that. If you look at the former agricultural training center, they're also regional. But what has happened is the governor who has them wants to own it, and the others are not willing to put in the money. In this second level of devolution, we want to see pro-people policies. We want to see pro-people programs, not about just growing ourselves. Nairobi needs to make sense together. What are the things? You cannot now have Nairobi without thinking Kiambu, Machakos, and these counties. We want to see that these people are effectively working together and even having joint authorities, which the Constitution anticipates, to ensure that you're delivering services to the people. So this has to be a new style of governing that is pro-people.
I think that the whole conversation on joint authorities is so important, and having that centralized unit. And I suppose equally, as you talked about the dispute resolution mechanism between national government and counties, seeing a body like that actually functioning, and not just to resolve disputes, but also to agree on direction, will be critical in solving that.
You know, one of the theories that I would like to remove from the minds of governors, I call it quail theory. You know, in Kenya, when someone keeps quails, we all keep quails. You know, that's the problem.
So when nothing wrong with a quail.
This is the problem.
A consumer of
I don't eat quail like that.
Let's be easy here.
County governments, what they've done in the last 5 years was basically wait for Alfred Mutua to have an investors forum, then every county has an investors forum. It is not about copy and paste. What you actually need at the county level is innovation. You need to be very smart about how you're able to innovate, and most of the time without the resources requisite to innovate. How do you create? You have a population, you have a resource, whether it is just pure land or it is minerals, wherever it is that you have there. How are you innovating?
And collaborating.
Yes, and collaborating to create opportunities for your people. That is really the challenge the governors are having. A governor is not stepping into that space to manage a payroll. That is the biggest mistake they are doing, that they are thinking, I need to get as many people into this thing. That's not what you're there for. How can you innovate? How can you be in Machakos and say, how can I make people in Nairobi come into Machakos to spend their tourism money? How can I be in Kiambu and convince the Nairobian to stop living in Westlands and come live in Kiambu so that I can help the real estate market in Kiambu? So I need to work with Nairobi to build a road that works between Kiambu and Nairobi. Those are the kind of solutions that governors need to give Kenya.
Everybody gets an appointment. You get a job. You get a job.
Everybody gets a job.
Everybody gets a job. If I could. Wow, really incredible and fascinating conversation. But I suppose let's just get to the top of the hour then, shall we, with this topic and conclude on this. So going forward in terms of priority of county governments, yes, we've talked about structures that need to work. There needs to be collaboration and innovation. But let's talk about service delivery at the end of the day as the face of government for the people. And counties, I suppose, in the first round of devolution had the the wiggle room to hide behind the executive and say, no, it's national government does not do what central government that's not working. How do you get the people first to understand that really the key services that they need day to day are services that should be coming from their county governments, and to really see citizen engagement on that and holding governors accountable instead of always, you know, this sort of, there was the prevailing school of thought that at the end of the day he's the president of all of us, so, you know, he wears the overall responsibility, and that may be true, but we've also devolved powers. So how do we keep counties accountable as citizens, and two, what should we be looking for counties to do very well in terms of service delivery? Joy.
What we've seen with this current election tells you that people are already holding their governors to account. The fact that so many of the incumbent governors were not able to retain their positions, despite, I mean, you have no background, there's no, you are the guy, you are the standard, you are the SI unit, and when you're measured against your own performance, the people tell you you are not good enough. That tells you that the electorates have gotten to a place they have understood that the county government is actually a very important component of their day-to-day lives. That is one. Secondly, we have seen also by the large number of people who came out to stand as MCAs, we find a lot more people who are professionals who are running as MCAs. Once upon a time when people used to go for this position for councillor, it used to be one of those things, you know, the guys who are not going to college and are not, they're the ones who run for Kajura. But now you've got people who are actually doctors, professionals who are actually going for these MCA positions. So in terms of even the quality and the caliber of people that we have in the county assemblies, we have people who are more likely to be able to deliver what the people are aspiring for. Then as citizens, we need to also hold our leaders to account. Like Kamada said, some of these devolved functions that the county is supposed to deliver on. Let me pick, for example, early childhood medication. It's one of those things where you should be able to tell the county government, look, every estate in this area has got a primary school, but we don't have a commensurate nursery school. What are you going to do about it? It's something that you can write, because people have the right to write petitions, for example. I look at people in the West. Something happening in my community, I've written a letter to my local councilman. If he does not respond, I mobilize people, I do a petition, take it to parliament. Do you know we have the facility to do that even in Kenya? As a private citizen, you can write a petition and petition your county assembly. You can, if they ignore you, you can write and petition the National Assembly. As a private individual, you don't need anybody. People need to step up and take responsibility. This thing of that number serikali's idea, or hoping that somebody, akuna mtu amekuja, we are waiting for this man who will come and sort us out. People have to become proactive and demand the service that is due them. And not only that, to utilize the service that is due them. I mean, the middle class is one of those people. I'm part of the middle class, so I'm embroiled. We're the ones who decry all the lack of services and everything, but we're the ones who are happy to subsidize government to go ahead and find solutions to our problems. I mean, I went to public school and I'm the product of public school education, but my children are going to academy, yet I'm being taxed so that schools can be built. What does that tell me? I'm not willing to wait or to hold government to account to make the schools good enough that they're able to produce the level of quality of education that my children would benefit from, like I did. I'm happy to pay twice, to pay my tax and to pay this way. We have to get to a place where we say, you know what, we are going to go to those hospitals. We are not going to go to India. We are going to come to this hospital. And when we come here, we want to find, if we hold people to account and we don't budge, guess what? There has to be movement. We as Kenyans have made do with mediocrity for too long, and that is why our political class has been getting away with rape, murder, and manslaughter politically. God forbid, quite because we don't hold them to account, and then we are the first ones to cry that the facilities are not working, the people are not working, and we ourselves are happy to. I mean, how many people do you hear they fall sick and the first thing you want to do is Harambee to go to India? Why don't we insist that we want to have their services delivered where we are? And I'm hoping moving forward, especially for Nairobi, we are not going to let our government get away with what they'll be getting away with. We need to hold the county government to account, and we need also to be active in ensuring that they are to account. So somebody like Okia Omtata, for a long time I thought was a public nuisance, but at some point he pushes things to a level where you cannot ignore the man. I think I personally have to take up my own challenge and push until I see things happening.
The Kenyan voter, I keep saying, is getting a lot more sophisticated. That is why you found neighboring counties where one governor lost completely got 1,000 votes, and another one was overwhelmingly voted for, and the dynamics are the same political parties, same kind of population. So it just means that the population is actually recognizing that leadership has implications on the kind of services, the nature of services that we have. For as long as leaders are held accountable, for as long as leaders have seen that people have lost seats because they did not deliver, they'll deliver. So one of the jobs we must do, particularly for those of us in the media, is to keep telling people that you have a responsibility to hold government accountable. And if you do, they actually will react. The reason why we devolved is to ensure that the governor, your government, is in your neighborhood. It is not in Nairobi, it is in your neighborhood. You can picket before the governor's office. If the budget is wrong, you can actually go and you can do petitions there. You don't have to cross to Nairobi. And unlike the first county governments, which had the excuse of setting up systems, the systems have largely been set up. A lot of the basic infrastructure is in place. So right now what we want to see from these new governments is delivery of services. And if they do not deliver, people must actually even petition for sending people home, even if they don't succeed.
And just as a reminder of the devolved services, quickly, these are?
The devolved services, the critical ones are agriculture, which affects people, water and sanitation, health, very critical, early childhood education, environmental services. So the key things that people interact with on a daily basis are actually, in fact, the key things that people interact with daily and are not with county governments is actually security and primary school education. And from where I sit, by the way, I think we must talk about devolving primary school education. It doesn't make sense that primary school education is still managed nationally, but that's a conversation we need to have. Finally, Anne, there's something there's a conversation that talks about the level of corruption in the county governments, and therefore the truth of the matter is county governments were created for us to run away from corruption, and so not a whiff of corruption should be had in the county government. But let me tell you, the corruption in the national government relative to the county government is child's play. If you look at the numbers we are talking about for the consolidated county government, it's actually minuscule. It's monies that are actually lost in one ministry. So what we are saying, actually the more you devolve, the more you reduce the opportunities for theft. Not necessarily because people are better, but because the opportunities for theft are more difficult. Because if you want to build a dam, and you put a dam there in Kisumu County, and you tell people you have built a dam and you spend 300 million shillings, people will know there is no dam. But if you do it in Nairobi in the Ministry of Water and allocate even 1 billion shillings in some place, nobody even knows. People are not aware. So the more we devolve, the more we will reduce corruption, and the more we will use resources effectively for service delivery. So I am a great believer that if we are going to transform this country, let us continue to empower county government. If we are going to stop these fights about the national level and acting like life has come to an end, we need to recognize that yes, it's preferable if my party won, but all is not lost. This is not 2007. We have moved on.
Right,
I just want to pick up on his point, and one of the things that we need to realize is there's no voter who loses an election, and this is what I mean. The whole point of voting is to get your voice heard. Whether your voice is the 30,000 votes candidate X got, it means there are 30,000 people who stand for that. So if you stand for something, your responsibility as a citizen is to keep agitating for that which you voted for. That is the responsibility we have as Kenyans. So instead of demonstrating for my MCA who didn't get the seat, my governor who didn't get the seat, my president who didn't get the seat, I have a responsibility for the next 5 years to keep you on toes, to deliver to me what I expected from you. And what I'm telling Kenyans is this: the energy and the passion that we have, let us do it like Jesus did it. Sit down and form a whip so that you become the government whip. You are whipping the government into shape. That is where we are supposed to take our political emotions and make sure, whether it is Uhuru Kenyatta or your governor or your MCA, and indeed even your headmaster for your public school, keep them to account. That's what we need as a nation. We need to understand that the more pressure we keep building up on expectation of goodness, of kindness, and of the right thing, the more pressure we put on our leaders at every level, the more we will have a result of less corruption and indeed less tribalism. Because tribalism thrives when you have nothing else to focus on other than yourself. But when you begin to solve problems, I have never asked Waiganjo which village he comes from, and I don't even know whether you are really where you are from. You know, the truth of the...
Don't give me an identity crisis. I think I am aware.
But the question is, why don't we ask those questions?
Right.
Because wherever there is
focusing
function,
on other issues,
yes, whenever there is function, there is no room for pettiness.
Exactly.
So what we need to do is realize that just because I voted does not mean I am politically inactive for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
What I need to do is to continue petitioning, continue picketing, push my agenda on social media. Stop pushing, this is who needs to be there. Push, this is what needs to happen. Because at the end of the day, if it is done, it does not matter who did it.
Issues, not people, not pettiness. I hear you, I hear you. And I thank my panel for their thoughts this hour. When we return, we've got news just in the ongoing saga surrounding NGOs, and police and KRA officers have raided the AFRICOG offices in Lavington, Nairobi today. Of course, you know the NGOs Coordinating Board wants this body shut down alongside others. We're going to be talking after this. Stay with us.